In this topic, we're going to learn how to set up a data flow, and we're going to learn how to pull data from a data flow within Power BI desktop. A data flow is simply a centralized location for your ETL logic. We're going to connect to a data source within powerbi.com, and we're going to perform some ETL functions. And then the data is going to be stored in the cloud, able for us to pull from it directly if we want to. It's very convenient because you can perform some cleaning and transformations within the cloud and have multiple users connect to the single sources of truth, this data flow, in order to pull clean data from it. You don't need to have multiple users connected to a single data set table and performing the same transformations. You can just do it once and have everyone benefit from it. In order to get started, you just need to navigate to powerbi.com and navigate to a workspace. And you will see the button that says New. We just need to select the data flow. This is going to open up these steps, create a new data flow. You have several options here, but most of the time you're going to select this Define New Entities. Let's click on Data, Add New Entities. So we're going to create a new entity or just a new table. Just like in Power BI Desktop, we have a list of connectors that allow us to make connections to specific data sources. I'm going to select our SQL Server connection. Let's go ahead and look for Azure SQL database. Let's provide our server information, bielitestudent.database.windows.net, and our database is called Wide World Importers. And we'll see that we do not have an on-premise data gateway because our SQL Server database is hosted in Azure SQL. I've already provided credentials for this data source within the Power BI service instance. So it's already auto-populated my authentication, but you'll need to enter your authentications for the first time, and let's click Next. And that's going to reach out and make a connection to that database. And it's going to provide us all of the tables that we have available to us, just like in Power BI Desktop. Let's bring in a couple, such as order lines and customers, the usual three. And that's going to load these three in. And let's go ahead and click on Transform Data. Now my data has been loaded, and you'll notice that this looks almost exactly like Power Query within Power BI Desktop. And that's because it's just Power Query in the cloud. So we are connecting as many queries as we want here. And then once we're done, you're going to click Save and Close. And it's going to save this data flow for future use. But let's go ahead and create a couple of different transformations just to apply a little bit of logic here. So my order table, let's say I just want to filter down some data randomly. Let me filter down to where my order ID. Let's just include a few in here. Let's include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me replace pick by person ID. Replace values. Let's replace null with 999. Click OK. So we perform some sort of ETL within the data flow. Let's click Save and Close. It's going to validate queries can work. And once it does, that's going to load a new screen. It's going to ask us what we want to name the data flow. I'm going to call this example data flow and click Save. And what's really important here is once you've defined those entities, you actually have to refresh it for the first time in order to load the data into the data flow. So if you miss that little dialog and you didn't click refresh now, you can just go back to your workspace. And under data sets and data flow, just click that refresh button. So it's going to refresh it for the first time in order to house that data. Then we can use it in Power BI or anywhere else that you want. Okay, we see the sample data flow has successfully been refreshed. We can go ahead to Power BI Desktop now. Now we just need to go to the Get Data button, click on More. And there will be an option on the left side for Power Platform. Let's click on Power BI Data Flows. And now let's click Connect. This is going to ask us to sign in and go ahead and sign in quickly. Here we see all the data flows that we have available to us. We just created ours in the DA-100 course workspace. we see our example data flow. And if we open it, we're going to see all three entities that we have available to us. Let's go ahead and load all three of those. Let's load that. One thing you'll notice is this loads very quickly from Dataflow as opposed to from the database. So now let's go and transform the data. And we have all three of those entities. Specifically on the sales order tables, we see that we just have those 4 order IDs and the replacement null values in the pick by person ID column. So all the ETL logic is handled within Empower Query Online in the data flows. And we just pull the clean data sets into Power BI desktop. One last point, you can set up data flows to refresh on schedule, just the same way you would do for Power BI data sets, which is going to be a later topic. Just to show you quickly, in the settings for this data flow, you can set up scheduled refreshes to keep your data up to date. One thing to keep in mind though, if you have a Power BI data set that is pulling from a data flow, you need to make sure that the power of a data set refreshes after the data flow finishes refreshing. For example, if you have to refresh your data flow every morning at 9 a.m., you would need to make sure that the Power BI files that are dependent on the data flow is refreshed 9:30 or later, because the Power BI flows refresh isn't going to finish until around 9:02 a.m., but we need to make sure that the Power dataset kicks off at least after 9:02 a.m. Just keep that in mind because it's very important to make sure that refresh schedules make sense.